Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoy my video, please click the like button and share the video. It is the only way the YouTube algorithms really notices me. I will be very grateful to you. Unholy Secrets of Midnight. Scary story published by Scare Fiction. Read for you by Scare Fiction. Chapter 1. Return to Shadows. Jessica's car crept along the narrow road, its headlights cutting through the thick, rolling fog that blanketed the town. Her childhood memories of this place were hazy, softened by time, but the current reality was stark and unsettling. The town seemed to have aged overnight, with dilapidated houses leaning precariously and overgrown vegetation encroaching on the streets. It felt as if the town itself had become a relic, forgotten by the world and haunted by its past. She parked outside the old diner, a flickering neon sign casting eerie shadows across the deserted street. Jessica took a deep breath, steeling herself for the task ahead. She wasn't here for nostalgia. She was here to uncover the truth behind the recent spate of mysterious deaths, all occurring at the stroke of midnight. This story had the potential to be her big break, but it also dredged up personal demons she had long tried to bury. Inside the diner, her editor, Mark, was already waiting, nursing a cup of coffee. His skeptical expression barely softened as she slid into the booth opposite him. "Jessica," he greeted, not bothering to hide his doubt. "You sure about this? Midnight apparitions? It sounds like a tabloid headline." Jessica met his gaze, her resolve hardening. "I've seen enough to know there's something real here, Mark. These deaths aren't coincidences." Mark sighed, rubbing his temples. "Just be careful. This town has a way of swallowing people whole." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of another patron, a tall man in clerical garb. Her brother, Daniel, now a priest, hadn't changed much since their last strained encounter. His eyes, however, held a weariness that spoke of battles fought and lost. "Jessica," he said softly, a mixture of relief and caution in his voice. "You shouldn't have come back." "I have to," she replied, the tension between them palpable. "People are dying, and I need to know why." Daniel's warning lingered as she left the diner. Her next stop was the town's small library, where she hoped to find the reclusive historian. The building loomed ahead, its dark windows resembling empty, watchful eyes. Inside, the scent of old books and decay hung heavily in the air. The historian, Mr. Whitaker, emerged from the shadows, his presence as foreboding as the town itself. "Miss Palmer," he greeted, his voice a raspy whisper. "You're looking for answers that might be best left buried." "Tell me what you know," Jessica demanded, determined to unearth the town's dark secrets. Mr. Whitaker's eyes glinted with a mixture of fear and resignation. "The midnight apparitions are just the beginning. This town harbors a darkness far older and more malevolent than you can imagine." As Jessica stepped back into the fog-laden streets, the weight of his words pressed down on her. The investigation had only just begun, but already she felt the chilling grip of the town's secrets tightening around her, drawing her deeper into the shadows. Chapter 2. Echoes of the Past. Jessica's footsteps echoed against the cobblestone streets as she walked away from the library. Mr. Whitaker's ominous words lingered in her mind, casting a dark shadow over her thoughts. She needed to dig deeper to uncover the truth behind the Midnight Whisperer and its connection to the town's eerie past. Her first stop was the decaying church at the edge of town. The building, once a beacon of hope and faith, now stood as a haunting reminder of better days gone by. Its wooden doors creaked loudly as she pushed them open, revealing a dusty, dimly lit interior. Jessica's breath caught in her throat as she felt an unsettling presence, as if unseen eyes were watching her every move. Flashbacks of her childhood came rushing back. She remembered the nights when she would wake up screaming, haunted by shadows that seemed all too real. Her parents had assured her it was just nightmares, but she had always sensed something more sinister lurking in the dark corners of her home. Those memories, buried deep, now clawed their way to the surface, demanding her attention. Determined to find answers, Jessica left the church and made her way to her old family home. The house stood in stark contrast to her memories, its paint peeling and windows broken. Inside, it felt like a mausoleum filled with the ghosts of her past. She moved through the rooms methodically, searching for anything that might shed light on the town's dark history. Her search led her to the attic, where she found an old chest filled with family documents and photographs. Among them, she discovered a diary belonging to her great-grandmother. The entries detailed encounters with a malevolent spirit known as the Midnight Whisperer and hinted at a family curse tied to the town's history. Jessica's hands trembled as she read the words, feeling the weight of her family's secrets pressing down on her. With renewed determination, she headed to the town's archives. The musty basement was filled with rows of dusty files and old newspapers. As she delved into the records, she uncovered chilling accounts of the Midnight Whisperer's vendetta against those who wronged it. Each victim seemed to be linked to a family that had lived in the town for generations, including her own. As she pored over the documents, Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She glanced over her shoulder, but saw nothing. Yet, the sense of dread grew stronger, as if a shadow was stalking her every move. She decided to leave, clutching the vital records she had found, and stepped out into the twilight. On her way back to her hotel, she noticed a figure trailing her, always just out of sight. Her heart pounded as she quickened her pace, the narrow streets feeling increasingly oppressive. Fear and paranoia clawed at her mind, making her every step feel like a step closer to an impending doom. Jessica reached her room, locking the door behind her. She knew she had stirred something dark and dangerous. The Midnight Whisperer was no longer just a ghost story. It was a reality she had to face, and its secrets were pulling her deeper into a past that refused to stay buried. Chapter 3: Midnight Apparition. Jessica bolted the door to her hotel room and leaned against it, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. The mysterious figure had vanished into the night, but the sense of impending doom remained. Her mind raced as she considered her next move. The Midnight Whisperer was real, and she was getting closer to uncovering its secrets. Determined to gather more evidence, Jessica ventured out to the woods, where many of the midnight apparitions had been reported. The trees loomed overhead, their twisted branches creating a canopy that blocked out the moonlight. She moved cautiously, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. The woods were eerily silent, save for the occasional rustle of leaves. As midnight approached, the air grew colder, and an unnatural stillness settled over the forest. Jessica's heart pounded as she scanned the area, her senses on high alert. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, its form shifting and flickering like a ghostly mirage. The apparition moved closer, and Jessica's breath caught in her throat. It was a young woman, her face twisted in a silent scream of terror. Jessica stumbled backward, narrowly avoiding a tree root, and the apparition lunged at her, its spectral hands reaching out. She managed to scramble to her feet and run, the ghostly figure hot on her heels. Just as she thought she would be caught, the apparition dissipated into the night, leaving Jessica shaken but unharmed. Back at her hotel, Jessica reviewed her notes, piecing together the stories of previous victims. Each one had encountered the Midnight Whisperer at different haunted sites in the town, all linked by a common thread, a connection to the families who had wronged the spirit in life. The pattern was clear, but the solution remained elusive. The next day, Jessica met her brother, Daniel, at the old family home. The tension between them was palpable as they argued about their parents' involvement in the town's dark history. "Why didn't you tell me?" Jessica demanded, her voice trembling with anger and betrayal. They knew about the Midnight Whisperer, and they did nothing to stop it. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't know how to tell you, Jess. Our family has been trying to protect the town for generations, but we made mistakes. Our parents thought they were doing the right thing." Their argument was interrupted by a call from Mark. "Jessica, we need more than just ghost stories," he insisted. "I need something sensational, something that will grab our readers' attention." Jessica's frustration mounted. The pressure from her editor was pushing her to the brink, and the weight of her family's secrets was becoming unbearable. In search of more answers, she returned to Mr. Whitaker, the reclusive historian. He offered cryptic clues about breaking the curse, speaking in riddles that only added to her confusion. "To lay the Whisperer to rest," he whispered, "you must confront the sins of the past. But beware, the cost will be great. Sacrifices must be made." As Jessica left his home, the gravity of his words settled over her. She knew she was walking a dangerous path, one that could claim her life or worse. The Midnight Whisperer was not just a story. It was a curse that had plagued her family and the town for generations. And now, it was up to her to end it. Chapter 4. Whispers in the Dark. Jessica's home had always been her sanctuary, but now it felt like a prison. The paranormal activities intensified, each night bringing new horrors. It began with whispers, barely audible but persistent, echoing through the empty rooms. She would wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, unsure if the sounds were real or just figments of her imagination. One evening, as she sat at her desk, trying to piece together her notes, the whispers grew louder, forming disjointed sentences. She turned on every light in the house, but the illumination did nothing to chase away the shadows that seemed to gather in the corners of her vision. Her reflection in the window seemed to move independently, mimicking her movements with a sinister delay. Sleep became a distant memory. Whenever she closed her eyes, she was assaulted by visions of the past, faces twisted in agony, dark figures standing at the foot of her bed, and scenes of violence that left her shaking. The line between reality and nightmare blurred, and Jessica felt her sanity slipping. Desperate for answers, she returned to Mr. Whitaker's study. The historian's home was as oppressive as ever, filled with relics and books that seemed to whisper secrets of their own. Mr. Whitaker greeted her with a knowing look, as if he could see the torment etched on her face. "You're being tested," he said, his voice a raspy whisper. "The Midnight Whisperer thrives on fear and guilt. To understand its origin, you must confront the darkest parts of your family's history." Mr. Whitaker led her to a dusty corner of his study, where he pulled out a leather-bound journal. "This belonged to your great-grandmother. It contains the truth about the Midnight Whisperer and its connection to your family." Jessica took the journal with trembling hands, feeling the weight of its significance. She returned home and began to read, the candlelight flickering, as if in response to the dark secrets she was uncovering. The journal detailed the tragic story of a woman named Eliza, who had been wronged and betrayed by Jessica's ancestors. In her rage and sorrow, Eliza had cursed the town, vowing to seek vengeance from beyond the grave. As she read, the whispers grew louder, and the temperature in the room dropped. The candle flame flickered violently, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. Jessica felt a cold breath on her neck, and she turned to see a dark figure standing in the doorway. The Midnight Whisperer. Its eyes were hollow voids, and its presence radiated a malevolent force that chilled her to the bone. Jessica's heart raced as she stared at the spirit, her fear and determination clashing within her. The Whisperer moved closer, its form shifting and flickering, and Jessica could hear its tortured voice. "Your family must pay," it hissed, the sound like nails on a chalkboard. Summoning all her courage, Jessica stood her ground. "I'm here to end this," she said, her voice steady despite the terror gripping her. "I will make it right." The spirit recoiled, as if surprised by her defiance. The room seemed to pulse with dark energy, but Jessica felt a new resolve taking hold. The Midnight Whisperer vanished, leaving behind an oppressive silence. Jessica sank to the floor, the journal clutched to her chest. She was shaken, but more determined than ever. The Whisperer's story was one of betrayal and vengeance. She knew now that she had to confront her family's past, no matter the cost, to bring peace to the restless spirit and the town that had suffered for so long. Chapter 5. Unraveling the Curse. The morning sun cast long shadows over the town's outskirts as Jessica made her way to the ancient burial sites. The journal had led her here, to a place where the past and present seemed to intertwine in an eerie dance. Her footsteps crunched on the gravel path, the silence around her heavy with anticipation. She approached the first burial mound, its surface marked by weathered stones inscribed with symbols she barely recognized. Digging through the soil, she uncovered ancient artifacts, amulets, bone fragments, and pieces of pottery that pulsed with a malevolent energy. Each item seemed to whisper tales of betrayal and sorrow, echoing the curse that had plagued her family and the town. As she worked, the air grew colder, and an oppressive feeling settled over her. Physical and psychological challenges intensified. Shadows seemed to move on their own, and whispers from the past filled her ears, threatening to overwhelm her. Jessica pressed on, her determination fueled by the need to break the curse and bring peace to the restless spirit. Suddenly, a group of townsfolk appeared, their faces twisted with fear and anger. "What do you think you're doing?" one of them shouted, advancing towards her. "You have no right to disturb these graves." Jessica stood her ground, clutching an ancient amulet in her hand. "I'm trying to end the curse," she said, her voice steady. "The Midnight Whisperer won't stop until we make things right." The townsfolk were unmoved, their hostility growing. Just as the situation seemed ready to explode, her brother Daniel arrived, stepping between Jessica and the angry crowd. "Listen to her," he pleaded. "We all know the stories, the pain this curse has brought. Let her finish what she started." Crowd hesitated, and in that moment, Daniel turned to Jessica. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice low. "Our family played a direct role in Eliza's torment. It wasn't just our ancestors. Our parents tried to hide it, but they failed." Jessica's heart sank at the revelation, but there was no time to dwell on it. Mark, her editor, arrived on the scene, his impatience palpable. "Jessica, I need results," he demanded, oblivious to the danger around him. "This story has to go out now." Before she could respond, a dark figure emerged from the shadows, the Midnight Whisperer. The apparition's presence sent a wave of fear through the crowd, but Jessica stepped forward, holding the amulet aloft. "Eliza," she called out, her voice firm. "We know the truth. We acknowledge the wrongs done to you. Help us break this curse." The spirit paused, its hollow eyes fixed on Jessica. The air crackled with tension, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, with a piercing wail, the Whisperer lunged at Mark, who stood frozen in terror. Jessica threw herself between them, the amulet glowing with an ethereal light. The spirit recoiled, and Jessica felt a surge of strength and clarity. "We will make amends," she vowed, her voice echoing in the stillness. "But you must guide us." The Whisperer faded into the mist, leaving behind an uneasy silence. The townsfolk, shaken but less hostile, began to disperse. Daniel placed a reassuring hand on Jessica's shoulder. "We'll finish this," he said, determination in his eyes. Jessica nodded, her resolve unshaken. The journey to unravel the curse was far from over, but she was no longer alone. Together, they would face the past, uncover the truth, and finally bring peace to the Midnight Whisperer and the town haunted by its shadow. Chapter 6: Family Secrets Exposed. Jessica stood in the dimly lit hallway of her old family home, the air thick with dust and regret. The house had always been a place of nostalgia, but now it felt like a tomb, hiding secrets that had long been buried. She was determined to uncover the truth about her family's dark past, no matter what she might find. With renewed resolve, she explored the house, her flashlight sweeping over forgotten furniture and cobweb-covered corners. In the attic, she found a series of hidden compartments behind a false wall. Her hands trembled as she pried open a dusty chest, revealing a collection of old letters, photographs, and bizarre artifacts. One photograph, in particular, caught her eye, a family portrait with a woman she didn't recognize, standing ominously beside her great-grandparents. Her curiosity piqued. She sifted through the letters and uncovered a series of correspondences, detailing a shocking betrayal. Her ancestors had wronged a woman named Eliza, who had been a trusted servant. The letters spoke of a conspiracy to seize her land and silence her complaints. The revelation was staggering. Eliza's curse was not just a supernatural occurrence, but a response to a grave injustice. Jessica felt a pang of guilt for the sins committed by her family, and a cold realization dawned on her. The Midnight Whisperer's vendetta was not just against the town, but a specific revenge against her own bloodline. Jessica's brother, Daniel, arrived at the house, his face etched with worry. "Jessica," he called, his voice echoing through the empty rooms. "What's going on?" She met him in the living room, holding the incriminating evidence. "We need to talk about our family's role in all this. Our parents were complicit in the betrayal that cursed the town." Daniel's face turned pale as he read the documents. "I didn't want to believe it," he said, his voice strained. "Our parents tried to hide it, but I knew there was something they weren't telling us." As the confrontation heated, Jessica was overwhelmed by vivid flashbacks. Her childhood nightmares suddenly made sense. She remembered seeing ghostly figures, feeling an unexplainable chill, and hearing whispers that had been dismissed as childish fears. The supernatural experiences she had brushed off were actually echoes of the trauma her family had inflicted on Eliza. The final revelation struck like a thunderbolt. The spirit, Eliza, was not just a vengeful entity, but had been wronged by her own ancestors. And through some cruel twist of fate, Eliza was connected to Jessica more directly than she had ever imagined. The woman in the photograph was Eliza's sister, a link to the curse that had tormented Jessica's family for generations. Jessica sank to her knees, the weight of the truth crushing her. Daniel knelt beside her, his eyes full of regret and determination. "We have to make this right," he said softly. "We need to end this curse once and for all." Jessica nodded, tears in her eyes. The burden of the family's sins was heavy, but she knew what had to be done. With her brother by her side and the truth now laid bare, she prepared for the final confrontation with the Midnight Whisperer, ready to face the spirit's wrath and seek redemption for her family. Chapter 7: Clash at Midnight. The town square was a stark contrast to its usual quaint charm. As midnight approached, it transformed into a battleground of supernatural forces. The air was charged with an eerie energy, and unnatural fog crept along the cobblestones. Jessica stood at the center of it all, the weight of her family's sins and the burden of the Midnight Whisperer's curse heavy on her shoulders. Jessica had spent the day preparing for this final confrontation. She had gathered ancient artifacts, including the amulet that had previously warded off the Whisperer, and ritualistic tools from her great-grandmother's journal. She felt a mix of dread and determination as she placed the items around the central fountain, the focal point of the town square. The townsfolk, now divided, had gathered to witness the showdown. Some had come in support, seeking to put an end to the haunting. Others, driven by fear and superstition, were determined to stop Jessica, believing that meddling with the supernatural would bring about more disaster. Among them were those who wanted to protect their own secrets and maintain the status quo. As the clock struck midnight, the fog thickened and the temperature dropped. Jessica's breath came in frosty puffs as she scanned the crowd, her heart racing. The Midnight Whisperer appeared, its form shifting and flickering with malevolent intent. The spirit's hollow eyes fixed on Jessica with an intensity that made her skin crawl. With a surge of courage, Jessica stepped forward, holding the amulet high. "Plaza," she shouted, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her. "We know your story. We know the wrongs done to you. We're here to make it right." The Whisperer let out a bone-chilling wail, the sound reverberating through the square. The fog swirled violently, and ghostly apparitions materialized around them, each one a tortured soul from the past. The supernatural phenomena escalated, with objects flying through the air and the very ground seeming to pulse with dark energy. Jessica faced her deepest fears as the spirit's tragic story unfolded in front of her. Visions of Eliza's life and death, filled with betrayal and sorrow, flashed before her eyes. She saw Eliza's anguished face and the moments of betrayal that led to the curse. The emotional depth of Eliza's plight struck Jessica with a profound impact, fueling her resolve. Amidst the chaos, Jessica used her newfound knowledge and courage. She performed the ritual from the journal, her hands steady as she placed each artifact in its designated spot. The amulet glowed with a brilliant light, casting a protective aura around her. The Midnight Whisperer, now more translucent and less menacing, seemed to be weakened by the ritual. It hovered over the fountain, its form slowly dissipating. The fog began to lift, and the supernatural disturbances started to subside. Jessica, exhausted but resolute, looked around at the townsfolk. Some had begun to approach her, their expressions a mix of awe and relief. The curse had been confronted, and its power was waning. The Midnight Whisperer, now just a whisper in the wind, was finally at rest. As dawn broke and the first light of day illuminated the town square, Jessica knew that the battle was won, but the scars of the past would remain. She had faced the Whisperer, uncovered the truth, and sought redemption for her family. The town was safe, but the journey to healing and reconciliation had only just begun. Chapter 8: Dawn of Redemption. The first light of dawn bathed the town square in a soft, golden glow, dispelling the shadows of the night before. The supernatural tumult had receded, leaving behind a town forever changed by the events of the past few days. Jessica stood amidst the remnants of the confrontation, her heart heavy yet hopeful. The Midnight Whisperer had been laid to rest, but the resolution was bittersweet. Jessica surveyed the scene, the fountain, now just a simple structure once more, and the townsfolk who were slowly emerging from their homes, their faces etched with the weariness of those who had faced their darkest fears. The curse was broken, but the town's scars would take time to heal. Daniel approached her, his expression a mixture of relief and sadness. "We did it," he said softly, his voice trembling. "The spirit is finally at peace, but it's going to be a long road to make things right." Jessica nodded, her eyes reflecting the weight of their shared burden. "I know, but we've made a start. They embraced the emotional release, a culmination of their trials. The reconciliation was hard-won, but it was a step towards healing the rift caused by their family's secrets. As the town began to recover, Jessica's story reached a wider audience. Her editor, Mark, acknowledged the truth and bravery in her account. "Jessica," he said in a broadcast that captured the attention of many, "your story has brought to light not just a tale of terror, but a profound narrative of courage and redemption." The Midnight Whisperer was more than a ghost story. It was a testament to facing one's demons, both literal and figurative. The town's people began to rebuild, their lives slowly returning to normal, though the horrors of the past would always linger in their memories. The town's history was now intertwined with Jessica's story, and the scars, while still present, were a reminder of their collective strength and resilience. As Jessica prepared to leave, a sense of bittersweet finality settled over her. The town was changing, healing from the wounds inflicted by both the curse and the secrets of her family. Yet, as she looked back one last time, she couldn't shake the feeling that not all mysteries had been resolved. A soft breeze stirred the leaves, and Jessica thought she heard a whisper on the wind, a reminder that while some ghosts had been put to rest, others might still linger in the shadows. The final scene of her journey left a lingering air of suspense and possibility, hinting that even as dawn broke, the echoes of the past might still hold secrets yet to be uncovered. Jessica stepped into her future, ready to face whatever came next, with the knowledge that she had faced the darkness and emerged into the light.